Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Ruby Rogues podcast. This week on our panel, we have John Epperson.
Hello, everybody.
Luke Stutters.
Hello.
I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv. I just want to shout out, go check out devinfluencers.com if you're looking to be a dev influencer. I guess that's pretty straightforward. We have a special guest this week, and that's Valentino Stoll. Valentino, do you want to introduce yourself? Let everybody know why you're awesome and all that good stuff.
Hey there, sure. I'm a software engineer at Doximity. I've been working there for quite some time now. I've been working on Ruby quite a long time, and it's kind of my go-to crutch of a language, if you will. But I really enjoy hacking away on embedded systems with Ruby. That's been my latest craze. And, you know, I've really been digging deep into the Ruby core library and kind of just exploring it. And it's really not that scary. So I'm hoping to kind of make it a little more approachable for people, and hopefully get some more contributors out of it, including myself.
Nice. I remember working my tail off to become a senior developer. I read every book I could get my hands on. I went to any conference I could and watched the videos about the things that I thought I needed to learn. And eventually, I got that senior developer job. And then I realized that the rest of my career looked just like where I was now. I mean, where was the rush I got from learning? What was I supposed to do to keep growing? And then I found it. I got the chance to mentor some developers. I started a podcast and helped many more developers. I did screencasts and helped even more developers. I kind of became a dev hero. And now I want to help you become one too. And if you're looking forward to something more than doing the same thing at a different job 3 years from now, then join the Dev Heroes Accelerator. I'll walk you through the process of building and growing a following and finding people that you can uniquely help as you build the next stage of your career. You can learn more at devheroesaccelerator.com. So we have you on the docket to talk about the hidden gems of Ruby's IRB, but before we dive into that, you said embedded systems with Ruby. So are you using, mRuby for that? Or
For some projects I have, primarily I've been working on a Raspberry Pi. I'm no expert, so I picked up one of those starter kits that has a bajillion tiny little components to work with, and slowly chipping away at converting some Python examples.
To prepare for this episode, I also bought a collection of Raspberry Pi related devices.
Oh, there you go.
I too could code along with Valentino's Ruby guide. And as he says, the Python is infested, absolutely infested the Raspberry Pi ecosystem. There's Python everywhere, and trying to root it out of your hardware, getting a kind of Ruby pitchfork and digging all of the Python out of the examples is really fantastic work. So thank you very much for doing that.
Code by code, we'll make it through.
gross Python. Anyway, so yeah, we'll send people over to your Raspberry Pi Ruby stuff, because that's just cool stuff. In fact, we should just get you back to nerd out with that on anyway.
Sure.
But yeah, let's talk about IRB, because it's a tool that we kind of all go to, whether we realize that it's the Rails console kind of runs on top of IRB, or whether we just run it ourselves and then run stuff in it. Why don't we kind of go with kind of a high level overview of what IRB is for people who are just getting into Ruby, and then we can just assume that people know it and use it, and we can dive into, okay, stuff you didn't know about, right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, IRB is basically just a REPL. You give it input, and it'll evaluate the Ruby that you give it, analyze the syntax of it, and then directly show you the output for whatever that it is that you give it. Mm-hmm. So people work in REPLs all the time. If you open up any console, that's a REPL in a bash shell, basically. But Ruby's IRB kind of has a hierarchy to it that, breaks it, all the different pieces of it, into little modules that then pipe you through as it's going through and evaluating just the strings that you're giving it. And it does that in real time. And it does that basically in what they call a session, and wraps that in a context, and then evaluates it inside of a binding, which is really the underpinnings of Ruby's own core evaluation, is the binding object. And then through the binding, it can basically compile Ruby on the fly into, low level code and do whatever it is that you tell it to do. IRB, it's kind of like what gets you really into Ruby, right? You go and you're trying to learn try and learn any new language, even JavaScript as an example. You'll go and what do is you open up the JavaScript console and you try and play around and move elements around, or try and be the first to purchase a pair of sneakers or something like that. But learning Ruby is so easy. You'll do the same thing. You open up an IRB session and then you just type anything that you want and you could play around with the language. It's pretty powerful.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, I don't want to go too deep into what it is, and you kind of connected the dots, I guess, on how it evaluates the code. But I'm always looking for kind of the neat tricks, right? So let's start there, and then if we have time, we can come back around to internals or other things that you learned while you dove into this.
Sure.
So what are the neat tricks? Like what were the things that you didn't know it did that it does?
So coming into this, definitely the customization of the prompt itself. So I believe it was Matt Swanson that I discovered the customization of the prompt for when you're in a production server, that you could just signal, hey, this is a different server than your development console. You might want to be careful what you write in here. And from there, it kind of just exploded into, okay, well, what else is in this customization? And, you open up you find out, you start with the IRBRC as like your starting point. And it kind of leads you into the rabbit hole of customization. And what I realize is that you can basically make this file that will evaluate anytime you open up IRB and do whatever you want with it. So anytime you're trying to, open up specific set of code in a specific context, you can make a custom IRB file for whatever that context might be. So that was probably my biggest, aha moment. And as an example, what we eventually ended up doing, Doximity, was making a special Rails console that tagged the system internally to say, hey, any changes made to the database, make sure they're attributed to whoever the current user is. So we implemented that and then allowed, full auditing for whatever user was logged into the system, with just a simple little Rails customization.
Gotcha. So then we know, John is a witch. He turned me into a newt, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I got better. Anyway, you can see where that change happened, right? And you can go and you can reverse it or go slap somebody's hand or something like that, right?
Yeah, more for accountability than anything else. You say, hey, what were you doing during this change? Mm-hmm. Sometimes you just need to audit the specific scenario of a change so that you can go and make sure it didn't affect anything else, as a side effect.
Yeah, makes sense. Do either of you, Luke or John, use a custom IRBRC?
I didn't even know it existed.
Is this the same thing as Pry? Because I use Pry all the time. I know it's not, but
that's
I feel like
a question for me. I don't know.
Go ahead.
Is IRB Pry?
No. Short answer, no. I mean, there's a kind of a discrepancy here, and it's two worlds colliding where somebody made a better IRB at one point, and now kind of the features of Pry are sneaking into the native Ruby IRB.
Which is awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're completely different things at this point.
Yeah. What about the Rails console then? It's built on top of IRB, right?
Yes. Rails console is wrapped on IRB.
Unless you install Rails Pry and then you hook into Pry.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Pry has a Pry RC, doesn't it?
It does. Yep.
Yeah. So what does Rails do in order to torture or otherwise modify IRB?
I haven't looked into it.
You haven't looked at that? Okay.
I don't know that it's torturing it. My understanding. So obviously, if I'm wrong, let us know. But my understanding is that most of what Rails is doing with its shell is just loading a bunch of Rails files. Basically, you're just loading your environment.
Right. So you're adding to the context.
Yeah. I mean, if you open an IRB shell, right, even if you open it in your Rails directory, you don't have all those files loaded. But if you open your Rails console, it's already just like if you're running a Rails server, preloaded everything and run the initializers and all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So as far as like what Rails is doing, it's probably just a elaborate IRB-RC. Because anything you have in your IRB-C will be in the context of whatever ends up being the IRB session you're in. So when you do Rails C, I imagine it just loads the application and makes, a few things available to the terminal, like, the reload command or something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, the reload command is just part of Rails anyway. So yeah, I mean that makes sense that would be in there.
Yeah. So I mean that's
things?
that's kind of the value of the IRB-C too, is like you could define methods in there that do whatever you want. So, Rails has the customizations with a bunch of methods that it'll inject into the session and, give you that available. So I have some myself, which will give me as an example. So then I have a who am I,
right?
Basically, that gives you access to your current user's name and, a bunch of related ones to that.
See, and now I want to create an evil IRB-RC that like redefines common methods off of kernel.
I mean, what you could do is you can make your own input method that then remaps all of the characters. So as you're typing, it'll output a different character.
Yeah.
Sounds like my Apple butterfly keyboard.
Already implemented in hardware. That's what John is saying.
It's all good. It's
yeah.
It works. Again.
My butterfly keyboard. It didn't do that. It was just P.
Yep.
I just tapped it once.
So all right. So I have this really sweet. So first of all, I've actually done the auditing thing, right? We didn't do it through an IRB-RC or whatever. We did it differently or whatever. So that totally makes sense to me. But you guys implemented that through your IRB-RC?
Not technically the IRB-RC. We have a custom initializer for Rails itself that will just make some modifications to the Rails console itself and then start up, kind of call super on it.
Okay. So we're just talking about extensions here to our environment. All right.
Yep.
No worries.
So this kind of environment automation and warning is kind of really important for you because you're dealing with medical data and things. So it's kind of really important that you don't get it wrong.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, the customization of the prompt too is just hugely helpful, especially when you have to jump context through many servers. So we have at Doximity a series of staging servers that are separate from development, right? So that we can add quality control and test out a lot of our changes. And then we have several production servers that are all different. And it's nice to see them labeled so instantly, especially if you have a bunch of different terminal windows open, right, that all have an IRB session in it. You don't want to get confused about which one you're in.
Right. Of course, I've worked at a lot of places that don't even give you that kind of access to the production systems to even be able to run IRB, right? I mean, your ops people might be able to do it, right? And you might be able to give them specific instructions or check in a rake task or something that will do the work, and then they can run the rake task for you. But yeah.
And I mean, we don't all have access, and right. It's certainly limited.
But somebody's got to log in when
that's
all
true.
The systems go down.
Yeah.
And it's Friday afternoon and everybody's trying to do some stuff. Like, it just happens,
Yeah, this is the kind of double-edged problem of your sphere is because not only does it have to be really high security, but it also has to be high availability because the code is literally saving people's lives.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yep.
All right. So we talked about some stuff that's coming over from Pry. I'm like super interested because as a very heavy user of Pry, basically since I discovered it, like, I don't know, I don't even remember because I don't remember my life before Pry, to be frank. what are the
Are you
awesome
hijacking
features?
this IRB talk with Pry?
I mean, okay, all right. There are times when I load up IRB, right, and it's primarily when either I'm writing like a Ruby script, right, so I don't have a Rails thing going on, right, and
Mhm.
and I just want to load something up really fast, or if I'm working on a very large Rails system that takes forever to load, and I just want to test out something really fast. So then I just like load up IRB, require 1 or 2 files, and do a thing, and then exit, right? And in both of those instances, one of the first things that I often do is I type IRB and then I go required pry. So I have not lived without pry for a very long time. So what are some of the cool features that we'll get over if you know them?
Sure. I know a couple. I mean, a lot of these are like brand new, like in Rails 3, but there was just merged
Ruby 3.
a pry like ls command.
Okay.
So you can basically list all the methods on a particular object as an example. I imagine the next step to that would be, the cd command of pry, where you can, basically move into the object, and you can kind of already do that with IRB, because you can run IRB on any Ruby object and enter inside of the context of it. So if you make an instance of something and you IRB that instance, then you're in the context of the instance. And you could do the same with the class, pretty much any, object in Ruby.
How do you do that? How do you go inside the object?
Sure. So when you're in the IRB console itself, you just run IRB and then the object. So if you did, string new, and you just said IRB string new, you can enter inside the instance of a string and play with all the methods like that. You don't have to do the string's object name as the variable and then dot whatever. You just enter the method. So it's kind of a fun way to explore the object, and without having to, run a bunch of chained methods.
You can get it.
Do you know how
smart?
Do you know how smart I'm going to look at work tomorrow?
I didn't know that. I did not know that.
I didn't either.
Yeah, and I mean another cool thing, which Pry gives that maybe you just don't know about IRB, is you get a lot of context from the source code just using the method, right? So when you say, method and then colon the name of some method, it returns a special Ruby object that describes what the method is, what it does, the source location. And you could pull all that information to open up a new, I use Vim as my command or as my editor. So I often, I'll have a special, method in my IRBRC that allows me to open a Vim, editor with whatever the source location is for the method that I'm interested in the context of an IRB session. So it ends up, being you can open up any editor. It doesn't have to be Vim. Yeah.
Right.
But
no, that makes sense. That sounds really handy.
Yep.
So the only one of the main reasons that I like Pry is actually this, but it's not because you just use show.source, right?
Right.
But it's mostly because it's complicated to remember all the steps that you have to do, right? To grab the method as an object, then call, source location or whatever. The other thing that's an issue here is that Pry actually does a reasonably good job now. It didn't used to, but it does a reasonably good job of showing me like all the dynamic stuff that goes on when I like prepend 8 things into, which, is just going to cause problems anyway. But, if I'm overriding my method a million times in weird, odd ways, things can get weird. So yeah, anyway, awesome.
I don't know if anybody else has looked in, and not to plug Pry again, but there's actually a project called Ruby Jard that combines Pry with Bybug, and it's pretty incredible. You basically can do just like you can, binding.irb in your source code, or, Pry in your source code. You can do a Jard in your source code. And when it stops the execution, it has this really beautiful kind of split pane debugging session where it shows you the current line in context, but also shows you some lower level like definitions within that context. And it's pretty wild. I definitely recommend people check that out. I've been using that on a couple projects as well. But
I'm gonna have to
IRB
check
is still
that out.
my go-to for, just testing out random Ruby files.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw that in a Ruby Weekly, and I just have been slow to get around to looking at it. But I like pretty things, so we'll be checking it out.
Yeah, it's really great.
All right. So some sweet. Any other like things that are coming over, so we can wrap up that part.
Sure, yeah. Let's see. From Pry itself, I'm not sure. I do know that that IRB itself has introduced kind of some tracing mechanisms and measure utility to make it easy to trace the execution of specific method calls while you're going through, as well as processing time. So I actually do that for a lot of just quick performance testing of will this array method lookup work faster than this one in this context? Just turn on the measuring processor and just check how fast it runs with each case.
That's the thing that comes with Ruby 3, right? Specifically.
Yeah, I believe so.
So
and
that's
just-
really nice interface because it just does it for you after you turn it on.
Yep.
So you type measure, and then anything you run from your IRB or whatever after that gets measured.
Yeah, and it's line by line measuring too. So whatever you enter, every single thing will be, show you the processing time for it, which is really nice.
Is that combined with the tracing stuff? So is it gonna? So if I turn on tracing, right, and then it's giving me my whole back trace, am I also getting whatever we call benchmarking, right, for each of those lines?
Yep.
That's pretty sweet.
I'm going to go into my IRBRC and I'm going to alias that to vanity. So I'll type in vanity and then it'll tell me how fast all my stuff is. What else is coming in Ruby 3? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I saw one thing that I saw that I thought was really nice in the article that it kind of spawned this particular interview was that IRB is getting colors now. I don't have to require something separate to get colors.
That's actually in 2.7. So if you're already on 2.7, you should have colors.
Nope. I'm part of the skip crowd, skipping from 2.6 to 3.
Oh, there you go.
We
Do you have to
we
include
did
anything
this on a
specific
previous.
for that?
Go ahead.
No,
You
I
have
believe
to
it's turned
include
on by
something?
default.
Yeah,
okay.
Okay.
But one other thing I will note, at least with Ruby 3, actually it's 2.7, was the inline documentation. So if you just double tab while you're on a particular method name, it'll give you the documentation and the context, kind of like a man page.
Oh, nice.
And it does that through RDocs. So I don't know if anybody else here has a GemRC that doesn't include documentation when you install gems because it takes longer. I used to have that.
Dash, no, dash.
Yeah. So I've turned that back on now because it's so great to see, tab. How does this method work? I use that all the time now.
Well, yeah, because you had to use the command line utility to get RDocs before, or open up some kind of wonky web interface, and it just was never worth it.
Right.
But if it's in line when I'm working, that makes a lot more sense.
Yep. Because to be frank, the only good docs readers were all web browsers. And so whenever my internet goes out, I have to be like, oh, and then like go remember how to get my docs working locally again, like for the 3 hours at a time.
Yeah, or get it on the 5th try. Oh, these are the right parameters.
Yep, that's super cool.
Yeah, it's also, if you use a higher level like documentation app, right, which has some nice things as well. Like I use Dash as an example, but it has some drawbacks in that you have to know what you're looking up, and so it's nice having it in the direct context that you're in without having to go, okay, let me go to this other app, look up this context, this method.
Yeah, I stopped using Dash because I didn't like paying for it when I felt like my web browser version was better. It just this is kind of what I meant, but the web browser version is weak whenever my internet goes out. So
right.
Catch 22.
I don't pay for the Dash. I just wait for it to load.
So you mentioned the banner thing that kind of like started you down this road. Were there as somebody who likes my console to look aesthetically pleasing, were there any things that you were just like, oh yeah, now I do this all the time, customize my IRB shell, and everything is, pink and green or something. I don't know. I'm
Well, I
sorry.
have a
Like
lightning.
I shouldn't say that. I like
Sure.
aesthetically pleasing stuff and then immediately pick those two colors in conjunction. But
I have a thing with lightning bolts. My starting prompt is a lightning bolt. It tells me I'm in IRB. That's kind of nice. I used to, for the longest time, there's a Oh My Zosh theme that has a cloud, and when you have changes in your Git repository or in whatever repository you're working with, it'll show a lightning bolt to tell you that there's changes made, so you know whether you're in a clean state or not. So it's just fun.
that's cool.
It was kind of interesting making the custom prompt because I was just playing with it, seeing what you could do, and so I had actually picked up the quoting. So when you're in different modes in IRB, so example like in a string, and you have a string open in line, that basically has a signal to IRB to style it differently. And so I wrapped it in a quotes icon, so that like an emoji quotes, which was kind of interesting to use on a regular basis for a while. So I definitely will be using some emojis in my prompt for a while now.
Nice. I was trying to figure out how to get an X-wing on there.
It's possible.
Real emoji?
Probably not.
I don't know. This probably everything in the emoji space. What am I saying?
You might be able to find an emoji font that has it. It's like it's the smiley emoji, except it's, I don't know.
There's probably a Powerline font out there with it in there.
Yeah. Anyway, very cool. Hey, folks, if you love this podcast and would like to support the show, or if you wish you could listen without the sponsorship messages, then you're in luck. We're setting up new premium podcast feeds where you can get all of the episodes released after Christmas 2020 without the ads. Signing up will help us pay for editing and production, and you can go sign up at devchat.tv/premium. You mentioned, that you kind of got into this because you saw somebody else doing some stuff with it. What's the story as far as like you learning this stuff, right? Because I'm assuming there's a bit of a journey there, and it didn't just like upload to your brain, right? So what was the journey there, and how did this kind of get implemented over time at work and things like that?
Sure. I had dealt with IRB customizations for a long time, so I was familiar at least with the notion of IRB-RC and being able to kind of customize small things, but I didn't know the extent at which you can do it. Like probably another topic of conversation or blog post is the history itself of IRB, and you can kind of save those histories as files. So you could, in essence, and that's kind of where I'm going to go next with some of our servers, is to customize the IRB session per user so they all have their own history. Especially when you deal with a shared server setting, you run into a lot of, you hit up a few times and you're scrolling through somebody else's history that's sharing the session with you. And so that's an easy fix, scoping to a particular file. And so it started, just small realizations over time of, oh, hey, you can do this, you can do this. And then finding the actual need was we have these hack days at Doximity where the whole team will split up and work on anything in particular that could help be useful for the team. And one of the problems we had was this auditing, in that our auditing had to be explicitly set anytime any user logged into a IRB session or Rails console. And so, sometimes it would be forgotten, the auditing would get lost, and we'd have to go back and readdress those data concerns. And so somebody was like, hey, it would be nice if we can just automatically do this. And that basically is what started me down this rabbit hole to begin with. Is that possible? One. And there were some prerequisites to that, in that, how do you know what user in the system is related to the user that logged into the server? We happen to have some, formalities in place that lined up those usernames. So it ended up working out really well and being easier. than was expected. And then, so as you go through and once you have a custom Rails console, it makes you think, oh, well, what else can we put in here? What other, Doximity specific customizations can we inject inside the Rails console? Limitations, how can we add restrictions, things like that. And it becomes very easy once you have that place, that source of truth to kind of make those customizations. And I work in the terminal almost exclusively. That's kind of why I
Vim, right?
Yeah, because Vim, but more so, I have a very elaborate Tmux setup as well that I've just grown comfortable with, and so I try and do as much as possible. I don't like leaving the console at all. I've been looking at a couple projects to do even code reviews from the terminal. They're not quite there yet, but that would be my dream to just never leave. I used to use what was it? There was a chat service for a while when Campfire was around that allowed you to do that from the terminal as well. Maybe it was WeChat, but that would be my ideal environment. So, playing around with IRB and being able to do as much as possible there, open up any files, send things to the background when I don't need to use them, kind of thing. It's just a very nice workflow. So,
gotcha.
That's kind of my foray into the IRB space was, what is possible? What can you do with it? And how can you make things easier to develop, right?
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you about the Ripper?
Sure.
So this is from the Hidden Gems Ruby article. The Ripper, it says, is a lexical analyzer, and you run the Ripper command on a hello world, and you get loads of stuff out. How did you get into using that, and what are you using that for? Because that to me looks incredibly technical and obscure.
So mostly it's for analyzing memory usage. So with that instruction sequence compiler, you can then use it to see how Ruby is, making those instructions on the low level, and kind of it's a helpful way to debug how it's compiling those instructions. And sometimes when you're debugging a particular memory issue, you can elaborate on that using the lexical analyzer to see how it's constructing it on the back end.
Got it. So if you're calling in some external library that's memory's going missing, that kind of situation.
Yeah, something like that. It's mostly useful for really cross compiling. What do they call it? Transpiling. I haven't used it for that, but I know, what is it? Opal or Ruby Opal. Mm-hmm. There was some kind of project where they're translating the Ruby code to JavaScript as an example. So that's primarily the value of Ripper, is its AST kind of generalization. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with Tree Sitter, which is what GitHub uses as their code hinting. So anytime you've been on GitHub in a code review and you've hovered over a method name and it shows, hey, this is defined in this file, they actually use an AST called Tree Sitter that they've made with Rust. It's pretty wild stuff.
It is pretty cool. It doesn't catch all the dynamically named stuff, or the dynamic calls mostly. But yeah.
No, unfortunately.
I mean, that's Ruby. Rails specific mostly. All those after commit things that you're doing. Right. One of the things that I noticed in here was the switch from readline to reline. So does that mean that we're dropping the readline dependency? Like, I guess I tried to look that up and I couldn't find an answer real fast. I don't happen to know if you.
I don't know. I unfortunately I haven't joined the Ruby forums themselves yet. I imagine that will come soon when I want to add a feature to IRB or something like that. But so I don't know what they have plans for it at this moment, from just the master branch of the repository, or have they moved to main branch? I'm not sure, but they haven't removed it. It's still there, so they at least have it backwards compatible. But yeah, the reline's really cool because mostly for the multi-line support. So if you paste it in, I don't know, 15, 20 lines of Ruby code, you can actually just scroll up and edit it right in place. You don't have to go and, line by line edit and hit up again. It's really nice to work with.
Does it does it increase my buffer for pasting now that you're talking about pasting in here?
I can't answer that one. I haven't
So
played with that.
I've always had a problem with that when I'm like writing long scripts or something. Cool.
So I'm kind of curious now that you've dived. It's so funny because talking through this, I'm sitting here going, man, I really kind of just took this for granted that it just worked. Right. But yeah, now that you're, go ahead.
I was going to say that there was a few years back where I was looking at, somebody had pasted just the lib directory of Ruby's repo, and there's a ton of Ruby files in there. And at first, it's just like delegate class or something like that. Mm-hmm. Some simple ones that I could recognize. And then you realize, well, there's a bunch of other gems in here that are, I guess this is the core library, right? That's what's included. And that's kind of what got me to IRB eventually, is that, there are all these cool things included in Ruby. And I imagine the same with Rails, right? Where there's just way too many features for you to know all of them, right? But if you just spend a day and poke around, you're like really surprising how much stuff is in there. And I'm kind of hoping to turn this into kind of a more longer form series on what's included in Ruby's, core library, because there is just so much, like you were saying, you don't even know, you take it for granted that all this stuff is there. You just open up an IRB session and do what you're trying to do in the moment and don't realize kind of what's all available to you.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm kind of aiming at next is, you've done all this work to understand IRB, understand how it works, dive into the feature set. What do you wish it had that it doesn't?
That's a good question. I guess I wish it had more native integrations. Like as an example, being able to use VS Code or something like that, and, hooking up IRB to the editor. Mm-hmm. So you can evaluate, various things live from within the editor, which I know are kind of external to the Ruby source itself. But it would be nice to have kind of some more native things, even like a mechanism that would make it easier to make more extensions to IRB. Like, say, for example, this Jard project, which I know is built on something that's kind of a competitor to IRB. But they have a ton of modules that make it easy to do, XYZ. It would be nice if there were support from the, Ruby core team or something like that, that could help expose what's available and make it easier to extend, and say, hey, this is how you do it, kind of thing.
Right.
It kind of sounds like IRB is giving you a lot of what you want already.
I know. It's hard to poke any holes. Yeah. I mean, they already add extra features that I wouldn't have thought about. So
yeah, fair. All right. Well, anything else you all want to dive into here before we do picks? All right. Well, let's go ahead and shout out about some cool stuff. Hey, folks, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've been working a lot on figuring out how to help people become the most valuable developers on their teams, or becoming the top 5% of developers in the field. If you're looking to level up, figure out how to contribute more, get the career you want, get the career that you want that will support the lifestyle you want, then you should check out the Most Valuable Dev Summit. I've invited some of my friends across the community, people that you've heard of, people that have worked on systems that you use on a daily basis, people who have invented new ways of doing things over the years in programming, and I've asked them one question, and that question is, how do you become a top 5% developer? How do you become 1 in 20 of the best developers out there? And so we're going to go ahead and have that conversation with them in interviews on the Most Valuable Dev Summit. And you can find that at summit.mostvaluable.dev. John, do you want to start us off with picks?
Yeah, I will. So I just recently replaced my grill of over a decade. I replaced the grates a few times. Anyway, I've tried to keep that thing alive because it was one of those like double-sided, one half was gas, one half was charcoal, and I was very happy that I got it, and I got it for like $200. And so, I got it like a decade ago, and I'm like, oh, sweet. I'm ready to spend $200 on a grill, and like $200 will buy you like a little dinky thing that sits on the ground, and you know, you have to crouch down and use it. So I was like, oh, so I had to reevaluate a lot. And I went around and dug around, and I was just pretty angry that everything that I wanted to buy was like $600. But I eventually like found something that was pretty good, and I've been using it for like 2 months now. So I've been pretty pleased with it. I had to give up having one side charcoal and one side gas in order to get a good gas grill, because apparently they just don't put those two together unless you're willing to spend, you know, a small fortune on it. But yeah, so I found like this nice gas grill that gave me like 6 burners and like didn't completely break the bank at $350. So I was pretty pleased with it. I'll put a like link to it or whatever, but it also wasn't a deal because like there was a different grill that I really wanted that was at like the $400 price point. Only like my wife was like, well, you need to think over it for another night. And I was like, but I have been thinking about it for like a month now. And anyway, whatever. The deal was gone by the next day. So this one is stuck around for a while. So at about that price point. So that seems like this is probably its natural price point. So yeah, anyway, got a sweet grill and it works pretty swimmingly for what it is. So, and now I just have to work on convincing my wife to let me buy a separate charcoal burner so that I can do charcoal stuff when I have like more time or something. So
Right.
So I'll link that. That's my pick for this week or whatever. That's been very helpful because my wife does not like Mexican food, and the number of things that I can cook that are not on a grill are pretty much all Mexican foods because that's what I grew up eating. So that's what I know to make. So yeah, my wife very much appreciates that I can grill some stuff since we are dealing with baby things.
Nice. All right, Luke, what are your picks?
Well, I've got to pick my magic, haven't I? The my magic gem is definitely my pick of the week. What a marvelous gem it is, and
but only version 3.5 or lower.
You know, chat, how we were talking about JavaScript features kind of coming into Ruby 3. Well, now we've got kind of NPM features coming into the gem ecosystem, the Ruby gem system. We're really taking our lead from JavaScript at the moment. So I've linked to an issue on GitHub where some developers are saying that because this license changes to GPL, then everyone has to release all their source code. This really isn't true. This idea of a viral license was introduced by Microsoft in the early 2000s, and if you you can go on Wikipedia and look it up. And it's kind of a slur used against the free software movement. That there is this kind of nasty license that if you include it in your code, then you suddenly have to release all your source code and your business is over. There is a license called the AGPL, which has some restrictions on software as a service systems, but there is no strange magic license that you introduce that suddenly makes you do things. And people miss the point with free software a lot. They seem to kind of confuse it. The whole point of free software is that you have freedom, and if someone's making you release your source code when you don't want to, that's not really freedom. So people need to calm down on the GPL side of things. GPL is a great thing. It's built the computing infrastructure we have today. The MIT license is not so great, and I'm not such a big fan. But if you don't believe me, look into it for yourself. So there we go. My pick of the week, my magic. Thank you for keeping Ruby interesting.
Yeah, and so I'm going to pile on there because I was going to pick similar. And essentially, there's an issue in the Rails repo. I think it was introduced yesterday, the issue. And so, yeah, my magic used a list of MIME types that was GPL licensed in the gem. And so because of that, yeah, the whole thread is essentially a discussion over this idea of viral licenses and, how it does or doesn't ruin software, which I found to be mostly not helpful. Ultimately, there's going to be, they're going to somebody's going to talk to some lawyers. They're going to figure out what they're supposed to do, and then they're going to fix it so that if you're using Rails, you don't have to worry about it. But in the meantime, yeah, just be aware that this is a conversation that's going on. I'm going to see if I can find somebody who is an expert on this stuff so we can do an episode on it, right? Because I'm not an attorney. I don't know how all this stuff works. I don't know what the implications are, but in the meantime, yeah, it's something to watch for sure. So we'll put a link to the issue in the show notes, and let everybody kind of follow up on that. But they did actually close commentary on the issue, because after the first probably 20 or 30 comments, it just kind of devolved into people arguing over what it meant as far as this is good or this is not good. And ultimately, I think what we need to just see is what are the implications for the Rails community at large, and how do we continue to be able to write software the way we write software? Because a lot of these conversations about kind of the social structure of software and the legal structure of software are things that we don't really want to think about. We just want to think about writing code and enjoying technology. So anyway, we'll get somebody on who can tell us what we have to care about. So so that's one pick. I was looking back through my Amazon history for some ideas on other things I could pick. One thing that I've really been enjoying lately, I have a Soda Stream, which is a carbonator. You can make your own soda. They also sell mixes. And then I just order drink mixes in general off of Amazon. So they have like different fruit flavors and stuff like that. I don't drink alcohol, so it's kind of funny because I get this stuff that people add to their alcoholic drinks that just are the flavors, and we just carbonate that. So anyway, but I'm really liking it. They have an energy drink flavor and a cola flavor and a root beer flavor, and they don't have a cream soda flavor, but you can find one on there that is. I get the sugar-free flavors because I'm diabetic, so I'm gonna pick that. I've really been liking having that, and so that's something I'm picking. And then for the Dev Heroes Accelerator, one thing that's really been working out nicely for me lately that I've been using to get people in and then get them the content they need. I've been using Teachable, and I'm really liking Teachable. It's a terrific platform for just putting the videos up and giving people what they need there. And so I've been putting videos up on, hey, during the coaching call, it's a group coaching call. Don't always have time to dive into everything that everybody needs. But afterward, I can do a video on it, right? And then everybody has it. And so I've got some videos going up there, which is awesome. Probably going to turn it into a course at some point. People can just buy one off, right? And then if you want the direct coaching, teaching, you can go for it. But I'm really digging that. If you want to apply, you can go to devinfluencers.com/apply and get that. I'm also starting a podcast for dev influencers. So if you're thinking, hey, I'm not sure how to grow my career from here, we're going to be talking about how to grow it by building an audience, making connections through something like a podcast. In fact, specifically through a podcast. And I'm also going to be interviewing other people who have built audiences and influence in the dev space and talking to them about how they did it. And just giving you ideas about how that can be done, right? Because some people, what happens is they kind of become senior devs. They realize that, hey, the job I have now looks a whole lot like the job I'm going to have in a few years. Not really what I want long-term for my career. I want to keep learning. I want to keep growing. I want to get paid more 5 years down the line kind of thing. And so how do I do that? They don't really want to go the architecture route. They don't really want to go the management route. And so where do we go? So you can go the influencer route, right? And it's a lot of fun because you get to meet people. You get to explore areas you don't get to explore other ways, and you still get to code. And so that's kind of what we're doing there. So anyway, long pitch, but ultimately I'm doing Teachable, and I'm really enjoying Teachable. And then for the cart to sign people up, I've used all kinds of stuff, all kinds of membership software. I hate them all. I hate the shopping cart in Teachable, by the way. It sucks. But I've been using ThriveCart for all that stuff, and I really like it. It is terrific. It has an affiliate system that actually works, which is awesome. And so if you're going to be selling stuff online, I highly recommend ThriveCart. So those are my picks. Valentino, what are your picks?
Sure. The first one I'd definitely recommend any developer out there is called Git Reflow. It's a tool I actually built a long time ago now that helps automate your Git workflow. So it creates pull requests automatically for you. It makes sure to close out all your branches when you've merged down to your main branch. It does a lot of things that just save a lot of time when you do over and over again. So I highly recommend check that out. Another pick I have is for an app called Bitbar. If you're using the Mac OS, it's a nice little kind of menu bar generator. So you can run scripts and show icons and various things on a periodic timer, which is kind of nice. So I use it as an example to see how many Docker containers I have up and how much CPU it's consuming, because Docker is painful at that. And let's see, I had one that just escaped me. Oh yes, Twilio. Twilio is incredible. I used it not too long and not to shout out to Python, but I used it to automatically orchestrate a AWS server for my kids to play Minecraft with their neighbors. So all I had to do was send some commands to a specific Twilio number, and it would start firing off commands on AWS, which was really cool. So that was kind of impressive how seamlessly that worked, and their documentation is really well worded and mapped out.
Nice. So now I have to ask. My kids love playing Minecraft, and they want to be able to play with their cousins, but we do not let them play on public servers on the internet because I do not trust who's going to be on public servers on the internet. So how do I set up a private server that their cousins can get on, or, things like that?
I just put the link in the show notes that we can add. Is that what you're talking about, Valentino?
Yep, that's the one. So
awesome.
Yeah, it was a little painstaking to get set up and configured it. I kind of hoped at some point to find some time to automate this so other people could just spin up their own AWS server that you can whitelist IP addresses on the fly using the Twilio app. So maybe I get to it. Otherwise, you can, go through the setup I went through to get it all configured on your own AWS account.
Looks good to me.
It was really fun playing with Lambda server and things like that to kind of just spin up, EC2 instances on the fly. And my goal was to just drive the price down as much as possible per minute, which is where I got to a nice comfortable spot with spot instances. So hopefully I can get back to it to make it easier for other people to kind of do the same thing. But right now it's just a series of Lambda scripts that just make it easier to spin up stuff.
And how much does it cost you to actually run this?
My monthly bill is maybe $3 to $5 a month.
Oh, okay.
I feel like, on average it's around $3. So I mean they use it regularly, so it's definitely been the cheapest I've found, just not time wise.
No, I like it because especially with my kids, most of my brothers and sisters live pretty close to here, but even then, they're connecting from their houses. But my wife's family in particular, she has a brother in Oklahoma, a brother in Texas, a sister that lives an hour and a half away, right? And so, it's not ideal, but they'd still like to be able to connect and, go play in the same world. So,
it's been great. So what I ultimately did is made a way for just some environment variables as, the allowed admins to whitelist IPs, which basically just become the parents, right?
Right.
And so then any parent that wants to be able to get their kid to join or, to stop their kid from playing or anything like that, they could just text this number and say, hey, remove this whitelisted IP for now. And then it cuts them out of the server, right?
No, that makes sense.
Yep.
Huh.
So it's been really helpful, just to help. I mean, it's hard because like you said, how do you trust any one of these servers? It's outside of Minecraft's, realms or whatever it is.
Right.
That is great too. But then any of their friends have to be in the realms also. And it becomes this thing of, okay, well, who's paying for what?
Right. And then, the other question I have then is it keeps your EC2. So you shut down the EC2 instance, but it still saves all the data because it keeps the hard drive around.
I have all that backed up to S3.
Right.
Is how that works. So then, as
so when they turn it back on, all their stuff's still there.
Yep.
Okay. Because they like to build towers and castles, and they'd be devastated if it disappeared. So
Oh, I know.
This is the sound of Chuck's weekend disappearing in Twilio.
that's right. I have 3 things to do this weekend. Now I have 4. But I'll tell you what, the 3 things I have to do this weekend make me the hero with my wife, which pays off, right? And then the 4th one makes me the hero with my kids. And if I get it done this weekend, I get it done a week early for spring break. Boom.
Well, I'll tell you what,
Good.
Minecraft servers are not that hard to get configured and spin up. So at least there's that for you.
Yeah, my kids keep asking me to add what they're the extensions, I can't remember, mods to the server or to our setup at home, right, on the Xbox. And so that'd be nice too, to be able to just
It's all about reducing that management time, right? Like, sure, getting it set up the first time is fine. The issue is like when you're going in there for the 20th time because Minecraft is updated and your kids want this cool new mod, and you're like trying to decide what dependencies are going to be an issue or not. And you have to remember, because the last time you logged in was 6 months ago, and now you have to like go read a million things, and your entire Saturday is gone before you finally finish with the darn thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, luckily I haven't hit that wall yet. My kids aren't as demanding with the mods.
Well, I'll tell you too, though, like giving my wife I'll just take away Minecraft, and all she has to do is text a number to do it.
Yeah, it's pretty huge.
Boom.
About delegating the administration of it to someone else. Yes.
Ultimate power. Yeah. All right, good deal. Well, I've asked you enough questions about that. Thanks for coming, Valentino. This was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a blast. Thanks for having me on.
All right. If people want to find you online, I'm assuming you're like on Twitter or GitHub and stuff.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, THE codename V, the codename V. Find me on GitHub at codename V. I have a blog where I post about my experiments with embedded systems and Ruby. That's at least been what I've been writing about currently. And that's blog.codenamev.com. So that's where you can find me.
Awesome. And my kids' lives just got better because of Twilio powered Minecraft.
There you go. You're welcome.
All right.
Honestly, let me know how that goes, because I've been the only one that's used it so far.
Will do. Yeah, you're gonna get an email, and it's gonna be like, this was so great. All right. Thanks again. And till next time, folks, max out.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.